Greetings. I really want to say this. It's plagiarism. It's plagiarism. But the guy, if he ever sees me, he might be pleased. Greetings and salutations. It's fun to say. That's why he says it. There was once a point when I was much less mentally fit than I am currently. I mean, right now it's a pretty precarious balance, but I did realize that the most beautiful art does not come from beauty, but rather from torment. And so, in that bleak, dreary state, I created, and I would like to show you my greatest creation from my bleakest state. I will be reading the Meek Crusade. Crows cawed above their meal. They dove upon those bleeding and dead. With fleshy prizes did they return to perch in flight. Torrential flocks darkened the sky over the eastern reaches' defenders. The last of the pious wore their final expressions, even as their faces were pecked away. Eyes wide with horror bespoke of forces from beyond this realm. Mouths were locked, shouting, only to have reached others in dismay. Noses, however, were in short supply among the dead. A man that was not a man wore a necklace of them, some still glistening with rings esoteric and fine. He felt joy, though it was a joy as yet unknown to mortals. He cracked his teeth with raucous laughter, only for fresh replacements to slide their way across grooved gum line. His armor was ancient, far beyond any forge. After nearly a century, the last of his enemy's manpower had been exhausted. They had fought with heart, so it had been decided that those hearts would be flayed by terror most profound. Now the ecclesiarchy would crumble, and with it the corpse god's last bastions on this world. Lord Skithid beckoned his birds, delighted that he would not be alone in such splendor. Cardinal Xanth eyed the remainder of his flock. Women, children, the elderly, the infirm. They looked to him for guidance. He looked to them as a merchant would gaze at the bottom of a barrel. Good citizens, the eastern reach has fallen. Demagogues and the damned run unchecked amongst our holy land. This elicited a tremor of a gasp, for such words brought grave implication. Those we sent are no longer trapped upon this plain. They now bask in his eternal light. It is the deliverance afforded to all crusaders, that they will know they are righteous in cause and form. The crowd rejoiced, their fervor burning with Astronomican's brilliance. There was an edge to the cheer, as if to compensate for a newfound brand of anxiety. Our holy cause is in peril. Our fighting men have done their part. He brought stifled fingers apart, gesturing widely. But now it falls upon the meek. For, as it has been said, that the meek alone shall inherit the battlefield. A hush fell. Wide eyes turned dreary. This final push will take back the Eastern Reach with steel and fervor and might most bombastic. This world belongs to us, and this darkness we shall not be found wanting. He cleared his throat with practiced ease. It has been declared that this Meek Crusade will purify not only our lands distant, but the souls of those sent forth. Go now in the Emperor's light. Xanth turned from the balcony with stewards in tow. Already the mothers lamented, and the old groaned, but what did it matter? Soon they'd be spent just as easily as their forebearers. Throngs and throngs marched through the streets. At their vanguard were the seasoned, They were frail but stout, hardened by years in the coffin foundries. At the rear were the women, dutiful but slight. Their pale eyes watched for stragglers, berating and nurturing in equal measure. Between the two groups was a sea of children. Few could comprehend just what journey they were embarking upon. They were each more versed in singing hymns or swinging censers. A bright young man could feel paranoia. He looked to see empty habs and shops. Even the pollution was starting to clear up, no longer embracing the sky with smoggy warmth. It was a strange thing to miss. The boy's thoughts were interrupted. There was a girl in the column. She was excited. She smiled at him. It was all he could do to smile back. He stepped with impetus and joined in a glorious song. The cardinal watched his crusaders leave. They were a motley bunch indeed, but would play their part well. Soon they'd be at the longest leg of the journey, the St. Ix's Pass. Xanth's posture reflected his holy purpose as he strode deeper into the cathedral. Here the candles flickered and water dripped. Here mold muted tapestry and banner. It was here he felt peace of mind, away from the watchful gaze of the rest of the world. Leave me! The stewards were already prepared to break off from their master. They did so curtly, leaving him to his quarters. A cold voice gave Xanth a warm welcome. Is it done? Oh, come now, ye of little faith. We are in most capable hands. The cardinal rose his in a show of favor. The cold voice spoke again, whispers thrown like darts. Are you prepared for your reward? A childlike smile stretched across wrinkles and bionics. Yes, I wish to look, I wish to see, show me. It has been too long. See your every desire. An oculum was produced. It swirled with dark energies. From it could be witnessed sights most fantastic. Everything Xanth saw was more divine than the emptiness of a mortal existence. His heart and mind and soul raced down the currents which led to a place few ever returned from. The meek were not meek in spirit. Onward they marched, out of their home and into the pass. St. Ix's Pass was named accordingly. He had served as emperor for centuries. This in itself was no paltry feat, for Ixis had but contempt for rejuvenant treatments. Only light gives life was carved upon both sheer surfaces hugging the crusade. Pilgrims had come far and wide to immortalize the saint's words deep into rock bed. Truly was Ix's Pass as long as his life. Crusaders' hymnals rang through the carved words, somehow amplifying the sound. Even with such volume, those at the rear of the column could only hear echoes from those at the front. Instead of clamoring to be the loudest, each section timed their verses to be sung in harmony with the others. Such coordination held a certain sort of majesty. After the day's travel, hoarse throats went quiet. They bedded down after making but a fraction of their journey. The boy was hungry. He was thirsty. He was in dismay. They were all lost. It became impossible to tell where they had come from. Perhaps some had decided to turn back. Perhaps others pushed against them. In all cases, the crusade was in calamity. Priests could not be heard over the turbulent crash of so many bodies. Their voices croaked, sometimes over the grumbling of the starving and malcontent. The boy was almost trampled. He grabbed and lashed in order to stay upright. Some sleuths were climbing the indents made by the saint's words, keeping above the press. Before the boy could climb, calamity escalated. Hooded figures lurked on each side of the pass. Even At such distance above, smirks could be seen and divined. They toted auto guns and fired. What reached the Crusaders was nothing short of shellstorm. Raised arms did little to prevent high-velocity firepower. Bodies old, young, and feminine were butchered where they stood. Those that were not shot and killed become buried by those that were. A few of the elderly brought their weapons to bear, heirloom rifles with telescopic sights. Hidden amongst the crowd, their counterattacks were dire indeed. Maniacs fell the long distance, clutching gut wounds and worse. Even though they died as they landed, the crowd ripped them apart, from limb and limb in anger. The boy saw the girl. She was climbing, ceremonial dagger clutched in jaw. There was inspiration. That was enough for him to follow. He ignored his kin, even as they were blasted off the sheer surfaces they ascended. It was enough to follow her. Before long, it made the boy queasy to look below. Someone established a heavy stubber position out of the cart and corpse. It rang its retaliatory cry, even as gunner after pious gunner was put down. There were so many others climbing now that the sides of the pass were absolutely writhing. The fires of fanaticism burned where hunger once held sway. The boy could see his desired target, a madman, deranged in form and faculty. After expending his magazine, the hunchback threw it and tossed it at the scrambling Crusaders. With a fresh mag, he unloaded bursts at point blank. His assailants fell, tumbling to their doom. As they died, the boy entered tunnel vision. He would only see red. When it came time to rush, he was met with a hail of gunfire. Dozens of rounds found their mark, shattering bone and brain and bowel. Children without childhoods were torn to shreds, screaming their favorite prayers. Many died in those final moments, but the boy was not one of them. He reached his quarry with tenacious embrace. All that had to be done was to bring the madman to the ground. Then she was there, stabbing ruthlessly. Her porcelain cheeks were spotted with crimson. In moments, the robed men were incapacitated. Just as the climbers made to throw their assailants down the chasm, the boy spoke up, "Wait! They may still serve the Emperor's bidding." Hunger shone in his eyes. There was glee there too. Weeks passed. Months passed. Lord Scythid's patience passed. Informants from the ecclesiarchy had estimated that the sacrifice should have arrived some time ago. Fresh, young blood to sustain the Lord for yet another millennia. He would not wait to be twisted by wrinkle and slough. Behind him closed the gate of the eastern reach. It had recently been altered to reflect the visage of the true gods. His lieutenants eyed him with vulture suspicion and jackal's salivation. They watched high above parapet until their master was lost to the horizon. He made it to the pass in 3 days. For 3 more did he travel alone, save for the wisps of his pets. They were each eager to enter this dimension. With diminished strength, Scythid could only bring in several. The Lord of Chaos felt the creak of every joint and bend in his body. He was tired. Oblivion seemed so close. A daunting prospect for one that had signed so many dark pacts. To sell a soul is easy. To sell that same soul to multiple powers was nothing short of cunning. But to pay each of those powers was nothing short of impossibility. Just as Scythid feared he would finally have to pay, one of his pets returned. It and a few brothers had been blessed with corpulent forms that they would scout. Feast! Many, many! Was all the Nethercrow could contrive. Scythid smiled. Such promise of renewed vigor gave him vigorous stride. Before long, he ran into a would-be adversary. The boy was a champion. Despite puberty's awkward embrace, the lad struck a certain figure. He was lean, just as his charges were, and their thousands, the Juves followed the barbaric boy. Each of those followers was of an uncouth nature. With raggedness and raggedry, they were formed. Their cries retained few imperial syllables. Few sported weapons. All were eager to fight with tooth and nail. A single bolt pulped the feral prince. He toppled, suddenly inanimate. Another took his place. She too had the bearing of primal nobility. She too had her brains blasted out the back of her skull by mass reactive ammunition. To their credit, the horde was unfazed. It seemed their own hunger lent fleet of foot. Grenades, crack, and frag pelted the wild crusaders. Many lay bleeding, their injuries softened by those in front of them. Others were concussed, their worlds rocked into dizzying spins. With such a portion of the sacrifices dazed their dead, their foes summoned a flight of crows. Each blighted beast dove to find or make carrion. Where they landed, blood blossomed. From the stricken emerged flowing crimson ribbons. They wove and tangled, working their way towards Skithid. As they passed through the living, so too was living life force, carried along the current. Crusaders were reduced to fetal states when exposed to such potent forces. The ribbons linked into Skithid's own lifeblood through rents in his armor and tears in his flesh. He could feel the warm vitality of those he robbed. Dark, leering faces were once more limited only to peripheral vision, their payment put on hold. It was at that moment that children fell from the sky. They plummeted for nearly half a kilometer before landing with considerable force. From positions atop the Ixis Pass, they launched themselves, bereft of fear. Indeed, the bastards reached out, clawing in midair. A pathetic few landed even close to their target. With renewed strength, the Lord brought more crows to battle. These did not feed, but did fight. In swarm flock did they scour both land and air. People were pinned while jumpers never landed. In the center of the carnage stood Skithid, elated that this sacrifice made for such sport. Nothing made it past crows without being shredded, yet they did not relent. Suddenly something did. A tunnel was formed through the little demons. This impossibility was born of the bones of Saint Ixis himself, heralded by haggard priest. The Chaos Lord was forced to put feeding further on hold. He lashed out with ancient sword. Usurper toppled, only after paving a way for dozens of the Meek to get through. Little hands scrabbled on claws. Feral hormones almost lent them the strength to pry helmet from power armor. Unassumingly, an initiate of the Imperial Creed knelt before the struggle. He raised cushion, as if an offering to the Chaos Lord. Before Skithid went to meet the true gods, he knew terror as he looked upon the relic bomb which had been so painstakingly delivered to him. The words, "Only light gives life," taunted from hewn stone. Each of the generals bickered over the right of succession. "Last you, I was Skith's secundus. His favor was plain to see." "A secundus that would have sent us down the pass. Whatever manner of terror lurks there would spell doom for our troops." "We could go over it." "No, I'd rather never face what killed Skithid. I'd rather trust the Baron. He would not be bothered. He could not even be bothered to convene. Where is he?" "Last I saw." Deliberations were cut short by bombardment. A clutch of Chaos's most brutal champions was crushed by a payload dropped from high altitude. The Baron adjusted his goggles and grinned a toothy grin. The destruction was total. Not even the post-mortals could have survived the collapse of the Citadel. Mustering grounds and depots across the eastern reach were carpet-bombed, that there would be few to avenge their masters. Flight after flight of bombers and troop planes darkened the sky. Only the St. Ixis Pass lay between them and their next targets. With so many defenses, yet such little manpower, the ecclesiarchy would crumble. Skithid's scheme would become Baron's bounty. "Cardinal Xanth, you have been found guilty of high treason. What say you?" The cardinal screamed at the top of his lungs. "Your mind and body and soul are to be purified. that your mantle will not be stained as you had stained yourself. There was little lung or air left to scream with, but Xanth persisted all the same. You have aided the arch enemy in defiling a sacred planet of the Imperium. Because of this, you are subject to excrucious extremists. It is the fate of all traitors, common and cardinal. From his tethered pole, the last thing Xanth ever saw was a torrent of warplanes, blackening the sky with malevolence. Even with eyes melted and ears crisped away, he could feel the cathedral shake as it was plummeted by high-yield explosives. Zalzez loaded another Kimhead into his launcher. The assault on the cathedral was a costly one indeed. Defenders held onto their positions with zealous tenacity. Cult troopers assaulted from their aerial transports with weapons vile and esoteric. Collateral damage was so high, Zalzez found general mirth. After the bile bombs hit, menials and priests left refuge that paved the streets with their corpses. Perhaps in those final moments, they sought some form of comfort in each other's fading company. Now they offered a prime firing position. From this slight elevation, Zalzez was able to aim his weapon over the barricades down the street. He let loose. The rocket spun lazily before disappearing behind the cover. A dark cloud blossomed near the point of impact. Men tumbled through the death smog, dismayed that their rebreathers did nothing to stop the virulence surging through their bodies. The Kimhead's toxin was short-lived and could travel freely through the skin's membranes. Necrosis spread through its victims, leaving spidery tendrils where it tread. Such agony continued far after motor control ceased, those infected simply unable to articulate their pain. Zalzez was delighted at the biological mischief at play. He grinned beneath alien fright mask as return fire diminished. Another cult trooper broke cover to advance. He was cut down by Laszlock, nearly shorn in half. With only a torso intact, the mangled man cried out to his comrades. The rest of the tainted cohort ignored him, eyes prying to the talk cloud and airborne debris. Through fright mask, the world was rendered into a tunnel of destruction. Peripheral vision eschewed instead for forward-facing focus. The battle appeared calm through static haze. Zalzez's launcher was loaded again, and the heavy trooper was primed to fire. His scope passed over balcony and alcove, sweeping for movement. Before he could fire, his launcher was shot, throwing him down the pile of corpses. Rigor mortis had not set in, so the dead still offered soft cushion. The weapon's exhaust vent was slagged, making it as dangerous for firer as it was for target. Zalzez wept for his weapon. He called out to any gods that would hear him and picked up his bandolier, still brimming with ammunition. Vorfeld der Mismarkt! The trooper called for covering fire. Stubbers and autoguns ripped out, tracers tracing geometric patterns overhead. Zalzez broke cover. He had to kick the dying man to prevent from being grabbed at. Return fire was finally mustered, but it was frantic. Far from shots of opportunity, the tainted cohort had their targets suppressed, even if they couldn't see each other. After crossing 30 meters, Zalzez found himself beneath his quarry. They fired blindly at him, unwilling to emerge from cover. Their voices were muted by the dull pang of fear. With a Kimhead in each hand, he slammed both charges together. After a short delay, Zalzez was engulfed in cloudy virulence. Even as the system was racked with agony unthinkable, he powered through, detonating head after head. Adepts tumbled from alcove, scratching at their flesh. Black streaks swam up and down the suicidal trooper's body, curdling flesh and stretching nerve. It did not matter. He was promised absolution. The Baron had assured everyone that their souls would be safe from consumption. The demons would not dare touch one of their own champions. In the instant between death and oblivion, Zalzez learned otherwise.